This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. Today's video is a beginner's quilt, and it's called the Sweetest Star for hand stitched or machine stitching. You know, I always like to let you know where we're going to go. This is the block, and I have named it the Sweetest Star because it goes together so well. Today's video will show you the steps for making this the Sweetest Star. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know that I'm the world's worst for wanting to make one block before I start cutting out a whole lot of blocks to make a quilt. And where this one starts, after I got that first block, is I took my carry-along board and I set up the 4 different rows of things that I was going to need. I was going to need 2 7/8 inch squares of different colors of cream or tan. I was going to need 2 7/8 inch squares of dark fabric. And then I was going to need 2.5 inch squares of light fabric, the same light fabrics I did before. So I'd cut some of the 2 7/8, I cut 2.5s. And then also 2.5 inch of darks, and there again I could cut from both the 2 7/8 inch ones and then cut the 2.5 inch blocks. And what was really funny was after I started this block, I started seeing variations of it pop up everywhere. I actually had one in the closet that belonged to my daughter, and if you can look at it, it's got a center block, square block, and then it's got the 4 around the outside. And then I found this one in the magazine, and if you look at it, it's got the square in the center with another square inside of it, and then the same points. The one that inspired the block that I'm doing today in the quilt is from a 2011 American Patchwork Quilting, and you can see it on the cover, except they have turned it and put it on point. And if you look at the very center, the square in the center is made out of 4 2.5 inch squares. For this block, we're going to have parts A, B, C, and D, and E will be the sashing that's added at the end. This is part A. This is the center square, and it's going to look like this one when you finish. And go back and talk about 4 blocks. We did 9 blocks before. I'd pinned my 2 colors together, face right sides together. Come over and put your little piece of fabric to catch your first stitch so you don't run off. Now I already know that I've got my machine marked at 1/4 inch. I'm going to let my needle down. I'm going to stitch that one. And once you decide to make your quilt, you can go ahead and you can do a bunch of these at one time. You can get them all set up and chain stitch them like I'm doing. And you can even do some chain stitching if you hand stitch them. This is a great pattern for hand stitching. And this, you've seen these before when you're doing the 9 block. And for these, it's really easy just to take and press it with your finger and then do your second one. This makes such a nice block. Okay, now we know that's not right, so we know that looks right. And we're going to take, and just like before, I am going to do this so that I can open it. And you can either press your seams to one side or you can open them. And I found that I had pretty good luck with that. So now I've got the 2 parts laying right on top of each other. I'm going to pin it to hold it right there, right now. And I'm going to come back. And I'm ready to start stitching. And I'm going to do my 1/4 inch. All the way across. Now if I'm lucky, when I open it up, And this sometimes doesn't always work, but you can see, look, right there it comes together, and you have just finished the center part. This is part A, and there again you can finger press it, and it's ready to be going on to the next part. This is part B, the triangle squares. They're made of 2 7/8 inch squares, one cream and one dark put together. And then you have taken and drawn a line through the center, which is going to be your cut line, and come out on the sides 1/4 inch, and those are going to be your sewing lines. Okay, now we're working on part B, the triangle squares, and you can see I've got them right sides together. I've taken and drawn my 3 lines, the one that's going to be my cutting line from corner to corner, and I have my 2 outside stitching lines. And this is small, and the material's kind of slick, so I've pinned it together. And I'm going to take and bring it over, and I'm going to stitch down one of the outsides. Now I'm using black thread so that you can see it. And you can actually chain piece these too. After you get done with this first block, if you like it, then you can make a lot of these at one time if you're on your machine, and just go down through there. That gets one side of each piece. And then I'm going to turn him, and I'm going to go down and get the other side. All right, and we'll pretend that I've done both of those. And they're sitting right here. These are my pretend ones. Don't need the pins anymore. Here's where the magic comes. Take and cut right through the center. And when you open it up, there's your triangles. 2 triangles to make your square, without having to work with little bitty short pieces. And now you can see the dog ears out here on the corner. You want to get rid of those. Here's one way. It's just to open it up and cut those off. And then this time I figured out, finally, after doing so many, here's another way to do it, is to take out a triangle piece to cut back that way, and the triangle comes off. See if you can see it this way, and cut back. And then when you open it up, you'll see that the dog ears are gone, and that way you only have to do 2 cuts instead of 4. But now I've made 2 of the same. I need to come over here, and maybe these are not even the ones that I want to put together, because they're both dark, but we're going to make them work this time. And cut off the dog ears. And I'm going to take one of these and one of the first that I did, and I'm going to put them together. And these just are just so similar, but that's okay. And for this, you want your point to be towards your body and the point to be towards your body. And this is going to make our first one, so we're just going to take and close those up. And I like to start with this end and go out, so I'm going to do that. And so here you can see, this is where I had sewn those together. I started at the top and went down. They stayed together, and I have this nice point, and I have a nice piece right here where I can make my next seam. So that's great. You're going to do 4 of these for each one of those blocks that we began at the middle, so it's going to take some work. Here's part C. This is adding the triangle squares to the 4 block that you made at the very beginning. And you can see here's the floor block in the middle, and then we're going to add a piece on this side, and we're going to add a piece on this side of the triangle squares. Okay, now if you look at this, we've got the center square, and now we've got our pointed piece on this side, and we've got a pointed piece on this side. So when we get to part D, I'll show you that one in a little bit, And when I open it up, you can see that I've put the pointed part in, which would have looked like this. But before I sew this one on and the bottom one, I've got to go and add 2 lights, one on the right hand side and one on the left hand side. And that'll make the complete top of the box. I do the same thing for the bottom. I start with this piece. Don't sew it on. Go ahead and add a light to each side. And finally, I decided to use sashing on my quilt, and their directions said to use a 2.5 by 8.5 inch strips of sashing, and then 2.5 inch blocks for the corners. And I'm going to show you where mine is right now. This is how far I've gotten. Now I did 20 blocks, and I did sashing between with the cream or tan blocks as setting points in the corners up there. When I got to 20 blocks and put those together, it made it 50 by 39. And that was with the sashing in there. I didn't add a border yet, but I did add the red border. I started with 2 inches, which I'm not sure if that's too wide or not, but I started with that. And then I'm going to add another green border on the outside. But you can see why this is called the Sweetest Star. It appears everywhere. It's got that great block in the middle, and then it's got 2 points on each side. This is a great block to hand stitch or to do on the machine. And the reason I think it's so sweet is because it goes together so well. If you're just starting to sew or starting to get ready to make a quilt, this is a fun block that goes together just like a dream. And here are the parts that you're going to make one more time so you have a reference. Block A, the 4 block square. B, your triangle squares. C, adding your triangle squares to your first block. D, adding the triangle squares that go on the top and the bottom. They have that little extra piece on each row to make it square. And finally, depending on the colors that you've used and how much bigger you want your quilt to be, you can add sashing, 1 or 2 strips of sashing to make it really come together. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. Thank you for watching. Any notes that I have will be added in the description. If you found this helpful or fun for you and you're going to give it a try or you just liked it, please subscribe and hit like. Thank you.